Team Orders Podcast. I'm Seb.
And I'm Victor.
And this is a brand new Formula One podcast where we'll be discussing the brand new regulations, new cars, new drivers, and all of the chaos that will be happening on track this season.
One of the most exciting parts of the new season, I think, is the regulation change. It's a complete overhaul from last season. The last regulation change was in 2022, and we had a very interesting couple of years. It was a very short one, 22, 23, 24, 25. We only had 4 seasons, and guess who won 3 of them?
Your favorite driver.
No, your favorite driver. You're wearing his jersey, not mine. Oh, sure. But yeah, so Max Verstappen won 3 of them, and then Lando Norris won the last one. It was almost a sweep for Max, but he lost the championship by 2 points. But brand new regulation set, complete shakeup of the grid, and we have an 11th team on the grid for the first time in a long time.
Very long time.
Right?
Monaco is going to be packed this year.
You know, there's technically a rule saying that you cannot have X amount of, or more than X amount of cars on a track, depending on its length. But of course, they made an exception for Monaco because Monaco is Monaco. And so they're able to have their 22 cars because technically it should only be 20. But it will be exciting nonetheless. The starts are going to go crazy in Monaco. The races, traffic is going to be unbelievable, especially in quality.
I don't know if you saw this, but they got rid of the 2 mandatory pit stop rule.
Yes!
Which, it made the race interesting last year. It
did. Yeah, sarcastic, yes. No, here's the thing. Look, I understand the teams wanting to have their flexibility with their tire choices and their race strategy. But at the end of the day, Formula One is a business. You know, if you go racing in Monaco, what I don't know what the exact statistic is, but 9 times out of 10, whoever is on pole wins.
Yeah.
Right? And then the only interesting part of the race is, okay, who can get their 2-second pit stop right, you know? And if it's 2.5 seconds, okay, you lost the race, right? So at least that 2 stop gave us a little bit of an interesting battle. You know, you had those 2 exciting seconds twice.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah, as long as you're not Daniel Ricciardo, you know, you probably had a good pit stop.
Yeah.
But
Daniel, let's not forget Valtteri Bottas, longest pit stop in F1 history. It took 2 days for that wheel to come off.
But, you know, Monaco, famously known for, you know, bad racing. But especially in the last 4 years, we've had, you know, not really ideal racing. And the whole reason for this regulation change is for the cars to follow each other better, especially in that dirty air. And, you know, Victor, I want to hear more from your side on the actual regulation changes, you know, engine, aerodynamics, and are we actually going to see better racing now?
Well, I think all answers will be answered after Australia. But, that is definitely the aim with these new regulation sets. First of all, starting with the engines, we've switched to about 50% ICE, 50% battery. So it's going to completely shift the dynamic of the race. Now, we've already seen in preseason testing that this is going to be about management, right? So there's going to be a lot more management being done during the race. So it's not going to be outright power performance. It's also going to be about the driver's ability to manage their battery. So it's like the rain. It's a great equalizer. I think this will be one step closer to bringing the grid a step together. Second of all, with the aerodynamics, ground effect is gone. I love the ground effect era cars. I think they were phenomenal. They were super aesthetic. I love them. I know a lot of people disagree because of the racing. And also the other thing is that now we are reducing drag, right? So we're making these cars a little bit slower and in terms of aero, and teams will need to find other ways to get that speed back with driving.
You know, you mentioned drag. You know something I'm really going to miss this season? DRS.
Yes.
Rest in peace, the drag reduction system.
Yes, rest in peace.
Well, how long was it get implemented? Back in like 2010, 2011?
Something like that.
But, oh my God, like, it would be so weird not having DRS anymore. You know, F1, I think one of the reasons why it was a bit more easier to follow, especially with overtaking, was everyone's like, oh, the car needs to be 1 second between each other. And there's like, then people would be more attached to their screens because they believe when cars are close together, especially within that 1 second, you're more likely to see an overtake happen. But I think that's something that's been a bit unfortunate, especially in the last 4 years, is that the only overtaking we've seen has been because of DRS and on the main straights. We haven't seen those overtakes in the corners. And I wonder, you know, what's going to be new now without DRS?
One of the most impressive parts of the new regulation change for me is the active aerodynamics, right? So when I first saw the regulation change, I was like, wow, this is something completely out of the future, right? You have aerodynamic. I thought it was going to be, you know, the shape of the body changing and whatnot. But no, it's the front wing and the back wing both changing shapes, right? So the back wing, it's going to, or the idea was for it to be like DRS, right? It would open, but the front wing would also come down like this. It would change the angle, it would come lower, less drag, which means more speed, right? Mm-hmm. Now, teams have been getting a little bit fancy with the way they use active aerodynamics. Like, for example, Ferrari came out with the most out of this world concept that nobody thought of.
We've never seen that before.
We've never, I mean, Mark Webber did it once back in the day.
Let's not bring up Valencia.
He didn't do it successfully.
Yeah. You know, the cars are supposed to stay off the track.
Hey, yeah, he went all four wheels off. The lift worked so well.
No, he would be a great figure skater.
Yes, that he would. Yep. But so Ferrari has developed, I believe it was on the second day of testing, they came out with one of the most ridiculous concepts I've ever seen in Formula One. And their wing, so if this is the car right here, their wing, their rear wing, instead of opening like this or going flat like this, literally went like this. And now, so it's upside down and angled slightly facing up, and it's creating lift. It's making the car lighter.
Yeah.
So now they took reducing drag quite literally by flipping it upside down. And now they basically created, it's acting like an airplane wing. It's creating lift.
Now, this is something, you know, we've never seen before, and has definitely been the biggest talking point during preseason testing, especially at the top of the pack.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting to see, especially so far in preseason testing, because with these new engines, I think the talk of the town, especially, you know, in these interviews at the end of the days, everyone's been saying Mercedes should be the fastest, they have the better engine. But, you know, you can't count out McLaren, the defending Drivers' World Champion Lando Norris, and the defending Constructors' World Champion, back-to-back Constructors' World Champion. But then you also can't count out Max. You know, him and the Red Bull, they've been, you know, there's a great relationship and pairing the last, you know, 4 or 5 years with Max's dominance. Red Bull's really developing and designing the car for Max's driving style. And now we have Ferrari, you know, very surprising, you know, with these new technologies, new aerodynamics. But something that I'm very interested to see is what is going to happen, you know, in that midfield pack. Because, you know, we've been talking about, you know, all these front runners, but what's the midfield going to look like, you know, especially with new regulations? Like, in the midfield, we have no clue who is in that midfield. We have no clue who is the best of the rest of, you know, the top 4 teams.
Yeah, so I mean, the talk of the town is that the top four teams are going to remain unchanged. You know, you have McLaren, Mercedes, Red Bull, and Ferrari. Those were your top four last year. And as far as we're concerned right now, what's most likely is that those four teams will finish top four again, just in a different order. Maybe. Who knows? Maybe we'll go back to back again. Maybe Mercedes wins their first Constructors Championship since that infamous 2021 season. Maybe Red Bull will win again with Max's absolute dominance and maybe a second driver who is able to provide a little bit more than what the previous second drivers have been able to do. Maybe it's Ferrari who finally get their dream championship with Charles Leclerc. And Lewis Hamilton, seven-time world champion, who has switched teams so unexpectedly to pursue his 8th title, or at least another constructors win. We don't know. But the best of the rest, you know, the other 7 teams, it's going to be such a wild ride to watch. You know, you have the Racing Bulls and Williams, who showed so much promise last year, right? Even getting podiums as well. Who would have thought that they would be able to get podiums?
Exactly.
You had Aston and Haas, who were kind of battling towards the back of the midfield. And Kick Sauber, I will give them credit as well. You know, Gabi Bortoleto had a phenomenal end of the season. It took him a minute to get comfortable with the car. But once he did, he put in some really, really, really good performances. And obviously, veteran Nico Hulkenberg, you know, a couple of really good races there. They hauled a decent bag of points.
And his first podium. We can't forget that.
And his first podium. You know, we've been waiting so long for that.
So long. And we were there. We were watching the race together, and we were so happy for him.
We were so happy. I mean, if I thought about it hard enough, I would probably remember who won that race, but I don't care. Nico got his podium.
Exactly. That's all that matters. That's all you saw on the socials.
Absolutely. But yeah, it's going to be so interesting to see who ends up in that 5th position. I think it's going to be very close. I do think that the teams finishing towards the bottom are going to, that's a little bit more obvious than who's going to finish 4th, 5th, and 6th.
Yeah, and speaking of obvious, and especially at the bottom of the pack, I think that has been probably the biggest talking point, you know, coming out of preseason testing and, you know, these few weeks from preseason testing until we actually get to Australia is unfortunately is Aston Martin.
Yep.
You know,
so wild.
It's honestly unbelievable as on the last day of testing, they are 4 seconds off the pace. And especially with the reports that came early this week, you know, of them just about making Australia just to be there, not even to compete. It's just unbelievable. Like, what is happening with that car and with that engine, with that GP2 engine? Honestly, it's happening again with Alonso, with engine problems, and with Honda. And I think we need to have a discussion about Newey, because has he done too much for the car?
So I think the problem is twofold. One, Newey came into the team. He didn't come in at the beginning of the season. The development was already underway. And the reports are that he completely changed the direction of the car, you know, because he had his interpretations of the new regulations that, and he wanted to exploit those interpretations, and he created this car. The reports are that he changed the entire engine compartment and the way the engine fits into the car after Honda had reached a significant milestone in developing their engine, right? So when it came time to fit the engine into the new car, it was very difficult. Not just that it didn't fit physically, like they had to change different components and the way they worked. And so that's part of the reason Honda has everybody saying Honda got it so wrong, but it's deeper than that, you know? It's a lack of planning. You know, you don't just show up to testing 4 seconds slower than anyone else. That hasn't happened since probably the 50s, 60s, when Formula One's first started, you know, when cars were, you know, you'd get pole position by a couple of seconds maybe. I mean, we had races last season where the entire grid was within a second.
Yeah.
Or during qualifying. So to be 4 seconds off the pace in testing is insane. And, as you said, the reports of them not showing up to Australia. I mean, listen, I've heard many things. One, that they're not going to show up, but they need to show up for a couple reasons. One, sponsorships. It's going to hurt them a lot more to not show up than to show up and do poorly. But also, what they should do is treat practice as a 4th day of testing. Take your 3 hours of testing, run the car the entirety of the 3 hours that you have. Get familiar with the car, understand what is going on, use that track time, collect the data. And I believe the latest report that I heard is that they're going to do qualifying, try to hit the 107% rule, which for those of you who don't know is that you need to set a lap time within 107% of I believe it's the pole position lap time for your car to be considered qualified for the race. Otherwise, you cannot race. So they'll hit the 107%, do the first couple of laps, see how their engine reacts to race pace, and call it a day.
Yeah. I think it was very worrying when they didn't even really set a proper lap time on the last day of testing. I think, what was it? I believe it was maybe like 12 laps on the last day of testing, and none of them were an actual flying lap. And that's where the worries really began, because, you should really, finally start understanding the car by the end of testing. To be fair, it is new regulations, new engine, new everything. But there's a reason why all the other 10 teams, are going to make it to Australia and compete for points for the win. And Aston Martin are going to be nowhere near.
It's definitely going to be interesting to see. I'm very curious to see exactly how they treat Australia, and if they do decide, hey, this is a race that we can do, if by some miracle they are able to race, I'm curious, one, that their engine is actually going to fail. Yeah. Is it going to fail in Australia? If it doesn't, who knows?
Now, Victor, if you were Alonso, how would you be reacting right now?
I would say I'm just going to run the race. Probably be faster to run around the track. Lance Stroll's going to get a message saying, please let Alonso through. He is faster than you. It's like, but he's on foot. Yes, we know.
But then something interesting, especially when we go down to the new team on the grid. We have, 11th team on the grid, Cadillac. Second American team. There was a lot of controversy on them actually getting on the grid because if you remember, Andretti, there was so much pushback from all the other teams that they didn't want Andretti to come into Formula One. But then when Cadillac had their bid, everyone was like, oh yeah, that's completely fine. Welcome home. So that's very interesting. That really set Andretti, really pissed off. But then something that is interesting with Cadillac is, with a new 11th team, that's 2 new drivers on the grid. But these are 2 drivers that we have already seen in Formula One, and we've seen them for a long time in Formula One. These are unks of the sport right here.
Unk status.
In your favorite Australian in Bottas.
Yep.
And then in Checo Perez, who was probably. People say he was the reason why Max won his first ever world title. So that's a very interesting driver pairing right there.
I mean, the Mexican Minister of Defense.
Yeah.
The defending he did throughout the 2021 season was incredible. And, he played the role of the second teammate very, very well. He didn't like it at times, but he accepted the fact that was his reality, and he did everything in his power to help Max win that championship. I mean, look at Abu Dhabi. Remember that sequence of, I think it was, a lap and a half, 2 laps, where he held Lewis up for something like 7 seconds.
Yeah, for Max to catch
up. And yeah, I mean, not to ruin the parade. I mean, the safety car would have neutralized it anyway.
Exactly.
But the matter of the fact is, at that point in time, you didn't know, right? And he pulled that together and showed how good of a driver he was. And that helped him retain the seat after a flurry of several driver switches, you know? And then eventually Red Bull decided it was time to move on, brought Liam Lawson in for 2 races, and then switched him with Yuki Tsunoda, who now is no longer on the grid, and promote Isaac Hadjar. So I think Red Bull have played the second seat very, very interestingly. But Checo is now at Cadillac, so is Bottas, and both very experienced drivers. Bottas did the same for Lewis back in 2020 as well, right? Both veterans of the sport. So I think this is going to help their development program quite a bit. That being said, I still don't know how successful Cadillac is going to be. I mean, what are your first thoughts when you've seen their testing pace and all the reports coming out of the factory?
I think they will be at the bottom of the pack. Unfortunately, they bring so much experience with them, but especially with all these new changes and regulations, new team, it's going to be hard to compete with all these other teams with, they have been in the sport for so long. But, there's always going to be surprises. Like, remember Haas when they first came on the grid, they really, put effort and was a surprise. And if I remember correctly, they finished like 5th or 6th, like mid-table in the constructors in their first season. These American teams, they have passion because they bring so much history from racing in the US, and they want to show that, on the globe. But the one thing that I am interested in is Bottas and Checo, their history of both being, number 2 drivers. So it'll be interesting to see, will one step up and, own that number 1 driver and kind of put Cadillac on their back for the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 3 scenarios. Either one steps up, or they're both fighting to be that number 1 driver, and you have a very interesting team dynamic like McLaren. Or what I think is going to be the most obvious thing is that you have 2 number 2 drivers. Yeah. I really do think this is going to be the battle for P21.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
I'm very excited for the season to start. Back in Australia, it deserves to be that first race of the season. It's always been one of my favorites. And I was lucky enough to go to the Australian race last year, and I had an amazing time. And I think it's probably been my favorite track or favorite race to go to, actually in person, because they do so much for the fans, so many activations, so many things you can do besides watching the race on Sunday. And also in addition, you have the F2, you have the F3, you have Australian supercars. It's really an amazing 4-day event, and it's a great start to the season, and I really wish I was there right now. I know one of our best friends, he will be there this weekend, so we're definitely gonna hopefully get some content from him. But I am very excited for Australia this upcoming weekend. I think we're a bit lucky that we're on the East Coast timing wise, because if all the fans in Europe, they're gonna have to be waking up like 4 or 5 in the morning, whereas we get just like kind of like stay up late.
Right. 11 p.m. for us East Coasters.
Yeah, so that's just a normal Saturday night for us. We're used to watching the UFC.
Oh my Lord, don't even get me started. Yeah, now the UFC is starting earlier too, as is F1. They're trying to accommodate their US markets a lot more, especially with the growth of the sport in this country. Formula One has grown in double digits year to year. And here in the US, we have 2 new races, so 3 in total, and they're hugely popular, just like Australia is. And, as you said, this is a race for the fans. They're absolutely gonna love it. It's such a great racing track as well. You always get phenomenal racing. always get some crazy overtakes. Turn 1 is always so fun to watch.
So
you know,
iconic.
especially with the the chance that somebody doesn't make the turn, takes the grass, and then.
Okay, let's get into our season predictions. Victor, I want to hear, your prediction for who's going to win the Drivers' Championship. I want your dark horse, for the championship, and I also want your flop. So which driver you believe is, going to have an absolute honker of a season.
Okay, so I'm going to come to my championship prediction at the very end. I'll start with the absolute flop. So I think the absolute flop of the season is going to be Cadillac. I think they're going to finish 11th. I really do believe that they will be lucky if they score points at all.
Really?
Yes. I think, as I said, it's going to be the battle for P21, unless there's some sort of a freak race, like, the first race in Austria of the 2020 season, where 9 drivers retired, and by default, Nicholas Latifi finished in 11th, which was his career best until, I think, the following year or 2 years later. But I do think that they're going to struggle to get points. That car is nowhere at the moment. People might say Aston Martin is worse off right now, but I do believe that they will pull it together. They have the facilities, they have the financial backing, and they have the experience to be able to turn it around. So I have no doubt in my mind that maybe Aston Martin will, maybe not finish the first couple of races, but I do think that they will be able to pull it together. Cadillac, I don't have too much hope in for, though.
Okay, my biggest flop. I think this might come to a shock for you, but I think it might be Alex Albon. I think something, I've always loved Albon. I think he is a great driver, great personality. I love him, behind the scenes and either on like socials or Drive to Survive. I think he's a great personality and he's great for Formula One. But something that I was a bit concerned about, he's been for Williams, for a bit, longer than Carlos Sainz. And Sainz came in last year, first year in Williams, and he was able to score 3 podiums. And Albon has still not scored a podium for Williams. He has been that team. He has been the one getting Williams back, to, the front of the midfield, honestly. He's been developing that car. He's been working so hard. But I was very shocked that Carlos was just very easy just to come into that car and outperform him in the races that matter.
It took him a minute, though.
It did take him a minute.
If you remember the first race, he spun. Let's not forget, Albon finished ahead, right? But about halfway through the season, he was so much worse than Carlos was in the first half of the season, right?
Yeah. I think my flop, my prediction is that I don't think Albon will finish in the top 10. And, I think this is something we might want to keep an eye on, especially for Williams. Like, don't forget that, Williams, they didn't even bring a car for, what was it called? The shakedown.
Yes, in Barcelona.
And everyone was, making fun of them, saying, you have so long, you started preparing, developing for this 2026 car so early last season, you can't even bring the car to shakedown, especially with all their challenges of getting, the cars safe enough for racing conditions and making sure it's light enough or it meets the weight specifications. So that is my prediction for biggest flop. I think Sainz will run circles around him this season.
We shall see. All right, so I'll move on to my championship prediction because my dark horse will make this interesting afterwards. My pick for World Drivers' Champion is Max Verstappen. Mm-hmm. I think we are going to, if testing is anything to go off of, which is never is. But if the reports from all the F1 journalists are true, we are going to get a historic battle between Max Verstappen and George Russell for the title, and a battle which I think is going to span many, many years.
So my championship prediction is Charles Leclerc. After seeing,
Come on!
after seeing,
We can be world champions, Lando!
after seeing Ferrari, they finished eight tenths faster on last day of testing.
Something like that.
You know, as long as they don't mess up the strategy, please Ferrari, stop messing up the strategy. Strategy? There is no strategy. You just wait for Lightning McQueen to choke, pass him, win. Francesco always wins.
I'm happy that you said Charles. I think it's very funny that we said each other's teams.
Wait a minute.
Okay, come on, let's switch.
Jersey's off.
I think so. Charles Leclerc is my dark horse, right? And I'm here thinking very analytically, which Ferrari fans are not good at, and neither is the team. But I do think Charles will be able to make a really good challenge for the title, right? Now, I said Max and George because at the moment, you know, you can never rule out Max, right? The rumors are that Mercedes is sandbagging by quite a bit during practice, or during testing, sorry. But also, Ferrari has done so phenomenally well. Their race starts during preseason testing were phenomenal. I mean, they predicted this. There's an issue in the regulations, and we'll talk more about it as the season goes on. But they figured out a way to not have to spend as much time revving their engine before the start to charge the battery to get a quicker getaway. So during practice, they were doing very well. And so Ferrari shows pace. But every time there's a regulation change and Ferrari does well, something always goes wrong. And as a Ferrari fan, I'm so tired of having false hope. So I have chosen not to have false hope this time. That is why I said Max.
Yeah.
But in my heart, I truly believe that Charles can win the championship.
Yeah. I do think it would be the craziest thing ever, but also the funniest thing ever is if in Australia, 5 lights out and away we go. Ferrari take off and everyone else is still charging their batteries.
Yep. Yeah, don't forget Haas as well, because they're using the Ferrari. I don't know if you saw, but in that first practice start that they did on day 2, I believe, Lewis was driving. I think it was day 2. Lewis was in the car, and there was a Haas. I forget if it was Esteban Ocon or Ollie Behrman, but Lewis started 9th in P9, and he was first by turn 1. That Haas was just as quick. So who's your dark horse?
My dark horse is going to be a driver to win the championship. It is Oscar Piastri. I felt bad. I felt so bad for him because he was comfortably leading the championship last season. I think we all forget how dominant he was in that first half of the season. He was out-driving Lando in the same machinery, in the same car, on the same tracks. And I think Oscar, got nervous. I think the pressure was too much for him last year. But I think he has learned a lot, from that full season, from being, so close to winning the championship. I think this year, I think we could potentially see, him coming out the gates, really well with a great start like he did last year. And I think he'll just there's a chance that I think he'll just run away with the championship. And, he's learned so much. And I really like Piastri. I think he is very steady, very calm, doesn't make rash decisions like a Max, but has a pace that can compete, can overtake Max and Lando. And he's shown that he can be there where it matters. I really enjoy his driving, and I think he is definitely someone who is a bit underrated, especially in F1, because he doesn't have, the loudest personality or has the best team radios. But I really like him. Definitely someone to look out for.
All right, so we've talked about our flop, dark horse, championship contender. Great predictions. I would love to see how correct or probably very wrong we're going to be at the end of the season.
Potentially.
Yes, but I want to know who you think is going to be on the podium for Australia. And we're going to make a game out of this. So throughout the season, we're going to predict the podium for every single race. And here's how the point scoring is going to work. If you guess the correct driver in the correct position, it's kind of like Mastermind, the game. So if you guess the correct driver in the correct position, you get 2 points. If you guess the correct driver on the podium, but in the wrong position, so let's say you guessed first and they finished second or third, then you get 1 point. So if you can get a maximum of 6 points in one race weekend for a correct podium. So who do you think is going to finish on the podium in Australia?
But I'm going to start with third. Third place, I believe, will be Charles Leclerc. I think he has a really good track record at Australia, and I think at least we'll see one Ferrari on the podium, especially, with their advantages we've seen so far in preseason testing. So I have Charles in third. Second, I have Max Verstappen. I think Max Verstappen is going to come out of the gates. He's going to be very fast, and he's going to do whatever it takes to, fight for that win. But I don't think he will actually get that win. But he will be close, very close behind the winner, who I believe will be the home favorite, Oscar Piastri. I think he will get revenge from what happened last year in Australia, and I think he will win his home Grand Prix for the first time. So that is my top three for the podium. First place, Oscar. Second, Max. And third, Charles. How about you, Victor?
Interesting. Okay, I have a little bit of a different podium to you. So again, I'll start in third place. So third place, I'm going to put a home favorite, Oscar Piastri.
Okay.
And this is purely based on the fact that I think that McLaren is going to be fourth best team throughout the season. And I'm sure I'll be able to explain a little bit more why I think that throughout the season, but it is his home race. He is a phenomenal, this is a phenomenal track for him. He's really good. And as you said, he is out for revenge. He wants to do well in front of his home crowd. It's the first race of the season. And he looked very comfortable with the car during preseason testing. So I do think that he's going to make a run. He is going to try to do as well as possible. But again, in a sport where a driver's performance is limited by the machinery, there's only so much you can do. I think Oscar will be very happy with a third place. In second place, I have also chosen Max Verstappen. Mm-hmm. I think that, he will be able to, once again, outdrive his car. Red Bull is one of the better cars. I do believe that, Red Bull will be competing for a top 3 finish in the championship. And I do think we're going to see that early doors, Max Verstappen making a run, competing for the win. But I do think that he is going to be topped by my favorite, Charles Leclerc.
Your boy.
My boy. Mainly because of the engine. I think that they're going to have such an advantage off the start, especially at the very beginning of the season. I think Ferrari is going to be very strong. Regardless of where Charles will start, if Lewis's start was anything to go off of in preseason, Charles, if he starts in 9th, he could be first by the end of turn 1. Mm-hmm. Half the cars may not get away. We don't know, right? Don't know. But even if he doesn't qualify well, given the engine and the starts they're having, I think he is going to have a phenomenal start. And if he starts first, imagine how far he can be ahead of the pack after turn 1, moments before a safety car has to be called to bring the pack back together because Arvin Lindblad had his DNF, as I said.
So your two predictions are kind of coming.
Exactly. But we shall see. We shall see how correct we are, or most likely very wrong.
Yeah.
I do think we will get some points out of these this weekend.
If we both get 0 points, something crazy has happened this weekend.
Yes, and that means the rest of the season is going to be really, really good. So we shall see. But I am very, very excited for the season to come ahead. Guys, stay tuned for our Australia post-race show. We will be recording an episode after every single race to break down exactly what happened in the race. We'll talk about strategy calls. We'll talk about how the new regulations are affecting teams. If we have a 9 DNFs like we did in Austria, we'll dissect each and every one of them.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and thank you so much for watching our first ever episode of the pod, and welcome to the Team Orders podcast.